Is the entire world going through a collective dark night of the soul? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to Deep Speak, where we ask the questions to the answers of the universe. Follow our crazy trains of thought as we start on one topic and end up
in a whole other dimension.
Good morning, everybody.
I said everyone-y.
We are traveling, so pardon the crappy noise that you're going to hear in the background. Hopefully we can weed it out in our editing process, but we wanted to share something with you. We forgot our microphone, but we wanted to share it anyways. So let's get into it.
Is the world or collective humanity going through an identity dark night of the soul? And I would say yes.
Well,
You want to elaborate what a dark night of the soul is?
Okay, so I think from my perspective and from what I've gone through and what I studied many, many years ago, the dark night of the soul is basically where your soul is, or you and your consciousness, I don't know, soul, whatever you want to call it, is forced into this extreme change. It's like a giant mirror being held up to you, and it causes you to look at your identity, your ego, right? The things that make you who you think you are, right? When you grew up in this world, you started to learn that you were a mother or a child, you were a worker, you were an American, you were all these labels, right? And it causes you to start to question all those things and to decide whether or not those things are actually who you are, or are they just labels that were put upon you or that you've decided to put upon yourself. And what is the core essence of who you are? Who are you? What is the core essence of your soul? If you didn't have any of those things, if you weren't a mother, a child, an American, if all those things were stripped away from you, who are you? And those are the questions that come up for you when you're going through a dark night of the soul. It is a very vulnerable time. It's a re-identifying of who you are. You're shedding all of your layers, all of your pieces of identity. You're getting naked, basically. And you're looking in the mirror and saying, who am I? Who did I think I was? What do I want to be? And how do I move forward? And it's a very... So a dark night is not one night. I mean, for most people, it will last several months to several years. And there's no clear beginning, middle, or end. It's just kind of a process that you go through. So when did you experience did you have more than one?
Two. I would say I had two. The first one was about 20 years ago, so that would be like 2001 through probably 3 maybe. Maybe even further, I don't know. It's hard to put, like you said, it's hard to put a time on it because it just is a process, but I know, definitely, 19 to 20 years old, I don't want to get too far into what caused it in the details, but, or what was a catalyst of it, but, I just didn't know. I felt like every day I was spinning around. I was full of anxiety. I was seeing a different world than I grew up in. Completely. So it also coincided with, 9/11 and everything that was changing in the world. So I do think there's a collective thing that was happening there as well. But I personally was experiencing that kind of anxiety and whirlwind change as well. I didn't really feel like the same person. I didn't know what I was going to do, what was actually an ego sense of self, like an exterior, or who I am to other people, and who I actually am as a soul, or an interior entity, whatever energy. And it was just turbulent. It was turbulent, and eventually it took a few years to go through the process, and I don't know how I would explain it, like settle down or find my place, a little bit. I don't really feel like, personally, I don't feel like I haven't always felt like I found a place where you stay, because I'm a type of person that's always growing.
Yeah, we both are.
But I do think that is different in contrast to a dark night of the soul time period.
Oh yeah, it's almost like, we're always growing, changing, growing, reevaluating, reprocessing, rebuilding. Like that's I think a sign of a very healthy soul or a very healthy person is someone who's doing that. And I know that both of us do that. And it can be really hard because it's hard to maintain relationships because people who really fit your life at one point can very easily not fit your life at all, a year or two later. So it's hard to maintain very long-term relationships unless somebody's kind of on the same journey, on the same path as you are. And that's what I went through too, with discovering okay, well, I'll just be alone. That's fine. I love myself. I love who I am and where I am. And that was after my dark night was ending. And then obviously then you came into my life and it was like, bam, okay. But it is interesting what you say. I want to go back on this just a little bit that, you talk about 9/11 kind of being part of a catalyst, right? A catalyst is the word you use, I think. That it's really interesting that that's true. I think 9/11 or these world events that happen that kind of shake your reality or shake your sense of security can really cause somebody to jolt you into a hard change, so you're talking about we're constantly changing and learning. It's like a very nice, smooth wave coming in and out off the shore. And then when you have a dark night, it's like a tidal wave just takes over and washes everything out, and so it does kind of the same thing, but it's a lot harder, a lot harsher. And it calls for a very strong change versus a very subtle change. And I think that a lot of people during 9/11 really did go through some sort of evaluation. I know for myself, I was a young mom at that time, raising little ones. And I know that was a moment where I said, am I going to heaven? That was really the big question that I had. And that's when I started to study the Bible pretty extensively. And then I started to found a church, started going to church, started to really dive into my relationship with God, with Jesus, with religion in general, and ask all those questions. And then that started me down my path of Christianity, which I think was really good for me. And I mean, that's a whole different podcast to talk about, that whole journey. And then do you have something else to say about that? But I want to hear about what your next dark night you think was.
The next one for me, I think was later that decade. The late is sort of a bookmark, and it was like early 20s, late 20s. Late 20s I felt like I was waking up to another world again.
Didn't you call that your early life crisis?
Yeah, I call that my early life crisis because it was very different than that first crisis. It had a lot of similarities. What am I doing? Who am I actually? Am I behind? I always felt like I was behind or like I missed out on something. And it wasn't clung to turning 30 necessarily. That was part of it, but it was a very small part of it. It was another identity orientation of trying to figure out where am I headed? What am I doing? And what can I do? You're just evaluating everything. And it was so intense because it's your daily life. You wake up and you just are like, oh, it's sort of like not knowing who you are at all. Really, it is a reset. Shit, And that one lasted, I would say, 4 years at least. I think it went through 2012 for me personally, at least. And then, go ahead.
Did you feel like during the process or during that dark night that there was a climax at a point where it felt like it was the heaviest for you?
That's a good question. Yeah, I felt like,
in hindsight, 2020, when you're going through stuff like that, it's hard to kind of judge, but I feel like, and maybe I'll give you my example if maybe that'll help. So I feel like mine started at probably the end of 2015, where I started to kind of feel like, wait a minute. And maybe one was earlier when I went through my divorce in 2005 and I had woken up and I think that that might have been considered a mini dark night. But I feel like because that was such a evaluation of, a breaking up of a relationship, that I guess I kind of always dismissed it as a consequence of moving out of a relationship. But I moved out of a relationship because I did ask the question of, what do I want in life? Is this what I want for the rest of my life? And so maybe I shouldn't dismiss that. Maybe that really was my first dark night. And I think that maybe that, and there was a lot of similarities, because there's an escalation of emotion that comes through as just very almost like a deep depression. It feels like you can feel it just weigh you down. Like you feel like you're in the pits of hell. It's just such a strong, deep sadness, overwhelming loneliness, confusion. It's like all of these really heavy emotions. And so I guess I would say that I think I would count that as one, but I wasn't aware that was even a thing back then. So I guess maybe that's a hindsight is 2020 thing. But for me, the one that I always refer to, though, I think was very prominent, and I was extremely aware of what was happening while it was happening, was 2015. It just started very gently with the questions, what do I want? Started to evaluate, a relationship that I was in, and who am I as a person? I think is just the biggest question that come to mind. And I don't know if you've experienced that too, but then it wasn't till mid 2017 that I think that was like a climax. I feel like it was like it hit extremely hard. I didn't have anything to back me up on, like, I should leave this relationship, except I knew I needed to leave the relationship. It just was like, every time I would ask the question, it was like, yes, go. And I'm like, but this is a decent guy, and he's and then it was like, it's time to go. Like, I kept just saying, like, it just felt so like I was being pushed into another direction. And I didn't know what the direction was. I didn't know where it was going to lead me, but it was so strong. It was undeniable. And I cried all the time, and not because of any situation. That was what I knew was something that I was going through, something very deep and soul level, was because I couldn't relate it to anything. I had a great life. So, and I wasn't depressed. It wasn't a psychological or chemical problem. So I didn't know, but I knew I was so aware of what I was feeling, and it was so heavy. But at that point, I knew it wasn't sadness. I knew it was something else. It was like just a ripping away of layers. But it wasn't like a despair, or it didn't feel like woe is me kind of feeling. It was just a deep emotional wave. Like waves of emotion would just come over me. And it felt like it was like this cleansing of my soul and all this sort of thing. And that was really strong, like probably June of 17, probably through January of 18. So did you feel like you had any climaxes during your dark nights?
Yeah, that's, I guess, what 2009 was the worst. Like, all those heavy feelings were definitely at a peak, and that all those, everything, feeling lost completely and disconnected, alone, confused, all those really, dark things were persistent. I think they peaked that year in particular, and then for sure, and then they carried on a few more years, really. But there were little pieces once in a while where I felt like, this might be something, really tiny pieces, but it really was I don't know which one was harder, honestly. If I had to compare the two, I almost feel like the second one would be harder, because the first one was just like, well, you're becoming an adult. And
right. It's circumstantial.
It's circumstantial, right? But the second one was just like, I can't explain. I have no reason why I was making the decisions that I felt like I needed to make, just like you said.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That I left a relationship also. It didn't make sense to leave that relationship. I started over completely. It almost felt like I downgraded in several ways, you know. So it was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And
Right.
you know,
like leaving everything behind
yeah,
that you had
leaving
built up.
everything
I
that
did the same
built
thing.
up
Yeah.
the old life, you know, of almost a decade, and like even career and schooling, like I was starting to leave it behind, and it was like, wow, well, that, and then there's a sense of self-punishment, like, well, I just threw all that away. Why did I do this? Well, it just didn't resonate. It just didn't make sense.
Did you feel like your soul was calling you in another
Yes.
direction?
Yeah. Like, and before we started recording, what I was coming to realize is a lot of this stuff takes years to look back and understand. Like everything we were talking about before, I'm like, oh yeah, now we'll get to the broader scale of this identity crisis, but all of a sudden it made sense, like, oh, I was doing what the world seems to be doing now, clinging to certain things that maybe you think give you comfort or shelter from this impending doom, right? You know, but there's sort of survival mechanisms, you know, there's survival mechanisms that can help, but they can be very detrimental if you go, you know, too hard into them also.
Like what?
When
Are you talking about coping mechanisms like drugs or alcohol or
for sure.
sex or anything?
Yeah, hanging out with the people that aren't good for you, and you don't act, you know, just to bide time, you know, get through, feel a sense of normalcy or attempt to feel connection, you know.
Yeah, because it's a very lonely process. You feel because you're so vulnerable, like you are naked to the world, and you're so vulnerable. And I do think also my second dark night, I guess, was a lot harder, but also easier because I knew what I was going through, and I had a beautiful support system. I had my coaches, Dove and Nicole, Twin Flame Revolution is the name of their coaching practice or business, and they were just the most heart-centered, loving, supportive people. Like they were the people that just really I could lean on, and I knew that I felt like they were surrounding me with like a protection of, you know, to keep me safe and to keep me feeling love. And I think that's really important to have during that time frame, and not just reach out to anybody, especially old people in your life that you thought were supportive or loving or that would take care of you, because people don't understand you when you're going through that.
That's exactly what I experienced as well. It is very lonely, and yeah, no one really, like, so once in a while you might have some people. I didn't have coaches, and I'm sure that was very helpful, but you know, try to understand where you're coming from. They just don't, you know, they just can't explain that.
Yeah, no, and as much as they love you and as much as they want the best for you, if they haven't gone through it, if they're not spiritually aligned, if they don't even understand it, you know, as I started through it, I think I was researching a lot, and that's how I knew. And I think that and maybe Dove and Nicole actually mentioned Dark Night of the Soul, but yeah, so I'm not sure where I was going with that.
I don't know either, but I wanted to bridge over to the global crisis or identity.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same thing. Now, it's interesting because me and you are talking about our past two experiences, and you would think that everything that has transpired since 2020 for us on a personal level, in a world scale, I don't feel like I'm in another dark night at all.
Right. So, and just to recap what we went through for people who haven't listened to our past podcasts, and what's wrong with you for not listening to our past podcasts, admonish you. 2020 obviously was a crazy time for everybody with the global pandemic, and then, you know, Josh lost his father at the same point. He was changing careers at the same point. And then I was diagnosed with terminal cancer at that same point. So it was a pretty rough year for a lot of people and especially us. But I do also agree with you that we handled that with incredible amount of strength and grace and the ability to kind of like get through it. But I also know that because we had each other also.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I nobody can do that alone. So in the face of all of the biggest challenges I've ever had and most people don't ever experience, I still don't feel like this is the same as a existential crisis. It's just...
I mean, what we went through.
Yeah,
these circumstances still didn't cause us to be thrown into any sort of...
And I think that's because not that this isn't discrediting anyone else, but what we were saying before recording was, I just feel like me and you did the work already. We did the personal work of orientating ourselves to...
Oh, and not like we're done. We're not also saying that we're done, because there's always work to be done.
Exactly. But we've done the work that I think the collective humanity is doing now. And that's not saying anybody's ahead or behind. I just feel like, yes, we're always doing that. But that's the point. I feel like the larger scale of this is the masses awakening, so to speak. A lot of them are the ones that have been sleeping their whole lives. Like they never really went through a true dark night experience.
Or a spiritual revelation.
Yeah, exactly. And so now is the time where it's literally being forced to... That mirror, as you said, is being held up where you can't ignore it. You can't turn your back on it anymore. And I think that is a large part, if not what is actually happening in the world. And we were talking about how that is almost more comforting than to think that there's, this dark force taking over, which there could be. But I do think whether or not that's happening, there is definitely a mass self-evaluation and self-identity orientation, identity crisis happening. Dark night of the world's soul.
Ooh, dark night of the world's soul. I like that. Yeah, it gives me a little more, it softens my heart a little bit more towards everybody that's being crazy right now. If we think of that they are just simply just waking up and experiencing all of this at a very rapid time. I mean, they didn't really get 3 or 4 years to kind of start slowly waking up and then realize, oh my God, what's going on? It's like, bam, you're awake, and now you need to deal with this. And a lot of people are like, no, I just want to go back to sleep, leave me alone. But I think that could it be both? Could we be experiencing? Could the collective consciousness or a large mass of people be experiencing a dark night of the soul at the same time? And in addition, evil is trying to maybe come in and take advantage of that because everyone's so vulnerable.
Yes. And I think that goes back to the seeking comfort and safety thing, whether or not it doesn't have to be drugs or hanging out with the wrong people, so to speak. I actually think that is what's happening, is that if there is I think there is some form of darkness, that negativity, whatever you want to call it, that is preying on this growth spurt and this confusion and this change. And it's the appearance of the order in the chaos, where it's trying to say your world is chaotic and it's falling apart, and I am the solution. It's providing all these pseudo things to provide this false sense of comfort. Yeah. You're growing, you're confused. I'll offer you, a medical procedure to take care of it all for you. I will offer you money from the government, whatever. It's coming in all these different forms where people are like, oh, I need your safety right now. Like this feels good, And
that would make sense for the people who are then resisting anybody who's like, no, keep coming through the dark night, keep coming. Because I think, maybe everybody's soul is being ushered or being called forward towards a sense of, I want to say purity, but that word can be misconstrued so much, but what I mean it in the purest sense of what it is, where you're shedding your layers, right, to become the pure sense of who you are. Not that you're washed with white and without sin or anything like that, but I think they're being ushered towards this, being called in, called by God or their own soul or their higher self or something. And a lot of them are like, oh my God, but this is so hard. I don't want to do this, and this is scary. And then they push against it, right? They're just gonna like, no, you need to do stuff so that I can feel more secure, and you're just crazy. You're just a conspiracy theorist or whatever. Like, to just label it as, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do this, because even though they know that it's the right thing to do, they want to go back to sleep. They want to feel safe. They're not brave. They're not courageous enough to walk into the darkness to get to the other side, which is a beautiful place to be. You know, when you let go of all your baggage, it's an incredibly freeing feeling. And I don't think that they realize that that's what's on the other side of this. And hopefully people who have gone through it are sending out some sort of energetic love and light. It's so hard though, because it's so easy to be like, stop trying to make me wear a mask. You know, like, stop trying to make me inject myself with something so that you can feel better. And it gets really like, knock it off. Like, it's hard to not get into a space of getting pissed off at these people for trying to push you to do something, and to try to stay in love and light for them when they're trying to take away your stuff is so difficult. But then if we want to talk about that evil that comes in for a minute, do you mind switching to that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that I like to have the belief system that everything happens for our highest desires, not our highest good, because good is so subjective, right? But for our highest desires, or what we have been asking for, what we want, what we desire. And we've talked about this several times, that cancer was a blessing, and nobody ever says that. It was hard to go through. It is hard to still sit with the looming doctor's voice of there's no cure and it's going to come back and you're going to die from it. But it was such a blessing in so many ways. And it was such an answer, an effective and efficient and quick, swift way to bring a lot of our desires into fruition. And it's so difficult to look at it that way, but it really is. And so if you look at everything that happens to you, even the bad, so-called bad things, and you see them as these blessings or these catalysts or challenges or opportunities rather than problems, then you're able to, well, for one thing, it shifts your energy to a higher vibration, right? And it makes it easier to deal with whatever it is you're dealing with, because you're not so low in vibration that you can't feel the love of God, or you can't hear the right decisions to make, right? And right steps to take, because when you're really deep down into sadness and resisting and anger and all that and fear, you're further away from the vibration of God, or whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever, floats your boat with terminology. So that would mean that even this evil, so-called evil that we're calling, all of these people who are trying to suppress us, trying to we want to depopulate the world or lessen the population. We want you all to submit. We want you to give us all your money, and then we decide where it wants to go, like a power struggle, a power fight. Like, there's so much, it's so undeniable. And people who can't see that is like, where have you been? It is so obvious that there's the Gates and the Fauci's and the Soros and the Klaus Schwab and all just the whole country, the CCP, all this sort of stuff that's happening. It's so obvious that there's this desire and this money grab and power grab that's been happening. Probably that's it. They didn't even deny it. It's like they actually have documentation showing you, the World Economic Forum, of what their plan is. Here's our plan. We're going to try to submit you all, and you're going to have nothing, and you're going to be happy. That's our goal, and lessen the population. And everybody's just like, you're a conspiracy theorist. But that's what they said they're going to do. That's what they want to do.
Right.
But if we look at that as like that they're actually doing that for our benefit, and I don't mean like, would never praise cancer as like, oh, thank God for cancer, like, but thank God for the opportunity, like, I think that bad things happen and bad people come into your life. The people who come into your life that like, you're like, oh, they did me so wrong. It could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be a lover, it could be a boss, it could be anybody. And you're just like, this person was so evil, was so bad, was so mean to me, was just like, why did I have to experience that? And that is the question you should ask. Why did I experience that? Because something came out of it. Something good, I guarantee you, came out of it. And probably multiple things that have had a very strong ripple effect, positive ripple effect in your life and maybe those around you. So if that's the case, then couldn't we take that to a bigger level? And all of this evil that's out there right now that is trying to control us and wanting to take our money and have power and all this sort of stuff, isn't that giving us this opportunity? Because what if we needed that evil to be in this world in order to wake all of these people up at such a large quantity at such a quick time, all at the same time? Because maybe there was a strong desire by most people on Earth to break down all of the systems that the world is running on. All of the systems just here in America, like the medical, pharmaceutical world, Western medicine, the financial system, the government, judicial system, our educational system, all of these things have been very dysfunctional for a very long time, and they need to be overhauled. And how do you do that? How do you do that slowly over time? Maybe this was an opportunity to break everything down. Like, this is the Tower card, is what I've always said. In the tarot, the Tower card, if you ever looked at it, is this tower that's just shaken and like everything's falling out of it. It's all breaking down. And that seems so scary, but it also means that the building of something fresh and good. And that's why I hate that Biden used that term, build back better, because that is literally what we want to do, but not the way that he wants to do it, not the way that he's meaning it. And that's a whole nother topic too, because the evil has taken all of our words and they've twisted them and tried to use them against us, which is 100% a narcissist. Like, that's what narcissists do. And we are dealing with a narcissistic energy of some sort that has taken over or trying to take over the world. Do you think that the evil that's happening or the bad things that are happening in the world, that there's a good spin on it?
Yes. I do think that it can't help but break down because everything is part of the same system. It's hard to explain, but I don't think that it's one versus the other necessarily. I mean, there's definitely a battle, but I think I'm not trying to go down the road of saying that, the devil and God are the same, one and the same, because I don't agree with that at all. But there is just enough separation to make it appear that way. But I do think that evil or whatever is outside of objective evil is actually just here. It's part of the same program. So it can't take over. It's like software trying to take over the hardware. You can't do that. I just think that like darkness and evil, whatever, is just a software program.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. And that God is not even part of that. God's the programmer. He's the creator of all of it, And that's why it's so funny when people say like, it's, God versus Satan. Satan is nothing compared to God. I don't know why people try to put them on the same level. There's like, God created Satan. Hello. Like that means that he's above that. Like, and the Bible teaches you that God never gives you anything more than you can handle, including every single person here on earth and us collectively. But it does say that Satan, he is our opposition, not God's opposition, right? But our oppositions are always there to give us a mirror, to give us an opportunity to be better. If we don't have an example of what's horrible, well, the worst type of being to be, then how do we know what to stay away from? And the same goes for Jesus. Jesus was the perfect example of what we should try to emulate. So God gave us an example of both. And we get that choice. Do we want to walk along the same lines as Satan does, or do we want to emulate Jesus? And we are given I feel like that is being shown more now than ever. Everybody is getting multiple choices to continue, multiple chances, not choices. You only have two choices, right? You follow Satan, you follow God or Jesus, right? And we have multiple chances to keep following that. Like I see things like we watch Fauci when he talks, and you can see that there's this twinkle in his eye that he knows that he chose the wrong, like he knows he keeps choosing the bad path, right? Like you're choosing Satan, Fauci, you're choosing Satan. And you can see it with Kamala. Like you can see after a while, you can actually see her face change, and she's more in despair. Like she knows that she's not done good, and maybe she's in we're all praying that they're in a place that they'll be given the opportunity. Well, they always get an opportunity, but that they'll choose to repent.
Yeah. It's interesting because you can't explain what that sense is, but I guess that's a part of a sensitivity that I'm sure the general populace is learning to tune into maybe more than they have, to observe people's nature and what they're experiencing without knowing them or being in front of them. It's really hard to explain, well, how did you see this? Well, I don't know. Me and you both felt it several times when we've watched these characters on a screen. You could it's just a certain way that they look, that they're acting. Yeah. It's almost like a soul screen, and not everyone has that.
And do you think that's getting easier and easier to do, at least for you?
Yes, I feel like that was part of my awakening. Or my first dark night, 20 years ago, where I felt like I could see right through people. I didn't like it. I was very uncomfortable. I couldn't be around people, just like you said, because I could feel them so intensely, and I thought I was crazy because of it. But now it's 20 years later, I'm like, I still feel that. I've tried to numb it. I've tried to pretend like it doesn't exist. I can feel people's energy. Everyone has that. I don't think it's a special ability. I just think it's a tool that you develop and try to figure out how to work with.
And you tune into, it's a tuning in. Yes. It's like if everything is vibration, everything is energy, then you're just changing the channel or tuning to a specific, I'm tuning into your energy, and so I can tell where you're coming from. But I do think that I was probably more easily manipulated way in the past before I started to research and work with narcissists and helping people get out of narcissistic relationships. I remember feeling like, whoa, this guy just totally, or girl, because they're in both, totally was really seeing this person through my other client's eyes. And I believed it until all of a sudden it became easier and easier to see, oh, wait a minute, this is a manipulation. He's trying to X, Y, and Z. He's trying to convince me that she's bad, or he's trying to convince me that he's, smart guy. You can almost hear it when people are talking to you or dealing with you. And even from just pictures, you can see, there's a manipulation. You can see when you're being manipulated. And I feel like that's getting easier and easier and easier, which is making it harder and harder and harder to be in the world right now.
Yes.
Easier to be in the world in one sense that you can read the room really well, but harder because of what you're reading, I guess. that room is crazy.
Exactly. It's like you want people to be better than what they are, but they're just sleeping still.
Well, and they're just people. That's the other thing too, is we tend to want to put other people on. Well, first of all, we tend to see everybody through our own eyes, right? We judge everybody based off of ourselves. That's a natural response. That's instinctual. It's hard to overcome that. And we think everyone should act and behave and think and feel the way that we do. And so it's hard to kind of step out of that and say, wait, everybody's different. But also that everybody is a sinner. You know, we are all imperfect and flawed, and not like in a way that I think that a lot of people in the religious community would be like, woe is me, we are all but humble sinners and must feel less than because of that. And it's like, no, it's like, why would you want to be perfect? Where else is there to go from there? Why, it's like starting a video game and already knowing exactly how to play it so that you can play it perfectly. Why would you ever want to do that? That's boring. So the sin offers you your temptations, and all of these things offer you the opportunity to be a better person, to overcome those sort of things. They're challenges that makes it more fun, that makes it more exciting. It makes a better adventure in life, right?
Yeah. The contrast is what makes it fun, I guess, right?
So what else would you like to say about this? Anything?
I just have questions like, what is the outcome of all this? Like, are we ever going to get to the point, or is it going to take such a long time that it might not happen at all on a collective scale?
In our lifetime?
Yeah. Are we going to be able to communicate with each other in a different way that doesn't rely on technology? Are we going to be able to telepathically communicate? Are we going to be more in tune with each other's intentions? You know, is that the veil that's lifting? Because it seems like it,
right.
At least for us. Is that going to be a collective future for all of us where we just read each other quicker and more efficiently?
Yeah.
Do we wake up, or do we all wake up and realize what that this is our world that we're creating, that we are an extension of God, you know, a finger of God, and not separate?
Yeah.
Imagine what kind of world that could be. I mean, it's kind of a scary thought, but it's an interesting one. Like, is that where we're headed, or are we gonna have a choice to continue to live in the matrix, so to speak? You know, or is it going to end up being two worlds where people want to stay in the matrix and others don't?
Yeah, divorce.
I don't know. I just have a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, and how do we help? Like, how do we contribute to helping the collective kind of go through this process? And how do we stay in a heart-centered, compassionate place when you have the libs of TikTok screaming at you and telling you need to make your 5-year-old have a sex change, you know, or crazy, like, you know, the extremes, right? How do you stay in a space of love and compassion in the face of adversity? It's probably going to be, it's one of our biggest challenges. Every day, it's this like frustration of like, okay, I love you. Now, please stop trying to make me do something that's ridiculous. Please stop hurting like, there's such a boundary there, because we're very libertarian at heart, esque, where we just want everybody to just do what they need to do, live their lives. If you want to call yourself a cat and live your life out that way, by all means, go for it, right? Just don't hurt anybody else doing it, right? Don't mess with our children, don't mess with our pets, don't mess with our the innocence, and don't tread on other people and their freedoms. That's all we want, right?
I guess there's a lot of different approaches and a lot of different answers. I just feel like it would be like to stay in that space as much as you can of, an open, heartfelt, empathetic space of allowing what you want, allowing freedom, you know.
Yeah.
Freedom can be extreme because it's the world we live in is extreme. It's, but we want that freedom,
And we're looking for balance, though, right?
Yes.
Because we're walking that line between chaos and order, and we're seeing, if you consider chaos, like Jordan Peterson considers chaos to be the feminine energy, right? Not women, not females, but feminine energy. And if you don't know the distinction, it's probably really important to find out, because that's a very important thing to have, to be self-aware and to integrate within yourself and appreciate both aspects of that energy. And then order is the masculine energy. And I feel like we have such a battle, and you can actually see that between the liberal and the conservative. You know, conservative wants, and I'm not saying every conservative, I'm saying in general, conservatism is more of traditional order. We have rules set in place. We all follow the rules. We all do these things. We keep order, right? And then liberal is more of like growth, change the rules, make it better, push against, like cause, disrupt the system. And the crazy thing about that is both of those are so good and so valid and so needed in our world. The blending of both of those is so important. That's what makes a beautiful relationship. It makes a beautiful human being when you can allow yourself the chaos of like, hey, I don't need to specifically do things exactly the way I do them every day, but also I can have a system in place and follow some rules and have discipline. That's a perfectly balanced person. And then it's also a perfectly balanced relationship, which makes it harder because you need two balanced people to make a very balanced relationship, but then they need to balance each other in complementary ways. And then how do you make that into like a global system, or a national, statewide, national world? How do you find, that's what I think we need to have is balance. Maybe that's what we're aiming for.
It is. I think at heart, that is what we are aiming for, most of us. I guess the problem that arises in this world is like, will we ever be rid of the entities that want to control everything, that want to sit.
Do we want to get rid of that energy?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it offers you, like your trainer at the gym is like, you need to show up at this time. You need to do 24 reps of this. You need to, that's the same energy, isn't it? Like it's very dictatorship and you must do blah, blah, blah. No, it's different. I think that's different than the evil. Then.
Yeah, I think that's different than the evil. The evil I'm talking about, and what I'm talking about is the people that literally will murder thousands of people to attain power.
Genocide.
That's what we don't need that kind of contrast. I don't feel like anymore. Yeah. We just don't need it.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm trying to look at the brighter side of this, and I always forget that there is that incredible extreme that is so horrific. The genocide and it's just I'm taking it back to like the normal people, not these crazy people on the full-blown chaotic or full-blown trying to control. How do we help the world find balance and peace?
I think it starts on a personal level. I think that's
the Gandhi kind of, is that what it is?
The change
begins with you.
Yeah.
Be the change you want to see the world. Yeah. That's what it is.
I agree with that, because that's really the only thing you have some control over anyway.
Correct. Yeah.
When everything is stripped away, all you have is you and your innards, and that's where the change starts. It literally first starts to change your own perception of the situation, and then your own perception of the situation changes your molecular arrangement within your body, and then your body, exerts a different appearance and vibration, and then it affects a change.
That ripples out into the world then. It seems so small, it seems so minor, but you're right. It is the only thing that we have control over is ourselves, of what we think, how we act, how we respond, how we feel, and what we're energetically sending out into the world. And I think looking at people as the world as going through this dark night of the souls, it helps me to be able to have more compassion for them, for it as a collective, and know that it gives me hope too, that at some point it ends, it comes back to a place of balance and normal and better than it has ever been.
I think that's what we all want. And I hope we can get there peacefully.
Yeah. Could we ever rid the world of the extremes, evil?
I think that goes back to what I was saying before. I do think it's possible. I think the first step is saying like yes, because I think it's detrimental to think that we can't beat it. I think we all have different ways of thinking how we would beat it, but you have to know what side you're on first of all. Like if you think you're doing good, but you're actually giving money to some of these people, like that's self-defeating. That doesn't make any sense. You actually, why fund the devil? Like it doesn't make any sense. You actually, first of all, everybody actually has to know what their actual cause is and where their cause is going, whether it's financial or just energetic. Like, where is it going?
Yeah.
What is it in line with?
And that's the trip that I've been on, is this whole idea of like examining our tax dollars and where our taxes are going to, how they're being spent, and they're being spent wickedly. Like when we are giving, taxation is theft. For a long time, I was like, I do my part as a good American in society, and I hate that I have to spend money on taxes, but I always thought, well, it's going to help the homeless, it's going to help the poor people, it's going to help better our roads, it's going to help, and it does do portions of those things. But when you take millions and billions of dollars and send it over into Pakistan for gender studies, you could have fed how many people with that? You could have homed how many people? You could have created systems to help the mentally ill and single parents. Like, you could have done so much with that money, and you're sending it to a completely other country to study gender identities. Like, and that's just one small portion of what's happening. Not to mention all of the money that's funding wars and genocide in other countries. The money is being spent in a very, very vicious way. It's not being spent in a respectful way. Our government is corrupt. Our government is using its people. It's not good. It's not good. And that's why I think that we're just seeing the beginnings of this dark night. And I feel like there's potentially going to be a complete collapse of all of these systems. We've already seen the educational system go down, and people reevaluating, pulling their kids out of public school, homeschooling, reevaluating what's being taught and how they're learning. I think that's great. Our medical industry is being reevaluated. Like, so many more people are saying, what in the world are they doing pharmaceutically? Like the amount of money you're spending on things, and how they're 2,000% markup on insulin, on life-saving drugs, things like that. Everybody's just kind of like, wait a minute, this is not okay. Like, I understand that people have to make profit and we respect businesses, but that's like making money off of people who are going to die. Like, that's not heart-centered. So we see that coming down. Our judicial system is being challenged, where we're seeing how judges are letting, I don't know, like our officers are arresting people, and then the DAs are getting them off for heinous crimes, but then like simple minor, disruptions, people are going to jail for a very long time. And we've seen pieces of that, like marijuana, victimless crimes being, sentenced for more than people who have committed horrible crimes against children even, is just insane. It's just so backwards. Even the idea of bail is a class issue. Like, okay, you can commit this crime and you can get out on bail as long as you can afford it. Well, how is amount of money justifying whether or not somebody should be able to get out on bail? Like, it's so ass backwards. And then all of our judges have their pockets lined, not all of them, but pockets lined, and even the way the court is set up, who gets, like, why is it Ghislaine Maxwell? Why are we not seeing her court records? Why do we not? Justice is not happening. Our justice system sucks. Like, it needs to be reevaluated. That needs to come down. And I do think that next is like our financial systems, and I think we're starting to see that with Canada, with the run-on banks up there, and I think we're going to see that more down here. We started to see it with cryptocurrency. Trying to create a parallel economy, I think, is really important, but that's all going to crash too. And I want it to. I don't want it to, but I also want it to. Because I don't want our money to continue to be spent in ways. It's like I said to you, where it's like, if you have, when I worked with couples who had one couple who spent a lot of money and the other one who was working their butt off, and it was so hard on that couple. It's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things. Like, I've had people be able to deal with affairs easier than deal with money issues, where the wife just keeps spending all the money on stupid things. Like, I just bought a pair of shoes for $3,000. What? Like, that was the money we needed so that we could buy a new lawn mower. And now you spent it on that? Now what are we going to do? Now I have to take out a loan so I can get a freaking lawnmower? That's literally what's happening in our government right now. It's just spending all of our money on stupid stuff, and then we don't have enough money for everything that we need. So what do you do with that, Divorce. Like, I don't know. Like, you put a cap on that person. You say, you take all the money away. No, I'm not giving you my money anymore. You get an allowance. Like, I'm going to decide what I give to you, which then causes other kinds of chaos within an actual relationship. But here with government, no, I think it's fine. I think we need to be like, no, you're not getting my money anymore until you can give me transparency as to exactly where every freaking dollar I'm giving to you goes, and I can track it. I want to be able to see that when I give you $10,000 this year out of the hard-earned money that I made, that I worked for, I want to be able to see what percentage went to what exactly. And I want to be able to see exactly what company. I want to see what I want full transparency of where my money is going. I think that is the best way to go. And this tax code where it's like millions and millions of pages of codes of like, you can do this, but you can't do this, but you can do this, but you can't do that. And you have to do this and you can't, like, all of that bullshit. Not your average American does not know how to, your average person, even with a college degree, cannot understand it completely. No, every single American should be able to do their taxes and understand it completely and not have it be so confusing. It shouldn't be the fine print on a terrible terms of condition, terms of service contract that you're signing, the legalese is just insane. I just did the simple sales tax that I was trying to do the other day. I was like, will you speak English? Like, this does not even make sense. That whole sentence, I just read that sentence 3 times and it doesn't make any freaking sense. Yeah. So that's how I feel about that.
Well, the thing is that all of this, whether it's information that's being, I had a little funny thought, like, it's funny that the government can spy on us and filter our messages, the harmless, well, we're not harmless citizens. That's why they're afraid of us, realizing that they can't control us like they want to. They can, as long as they keep up the facade, but this transparency, if you can spy on us, why can't we spy on you? I want to know who you are, exactly, what you're doing, where you're putting our money.
Where did your money come from to fund you?
Where's your money to come from? I want, where that, like that meme, like they should be like NASCAR drivers. They should have suits that show all their sponsors.
Oh, that's so perfect, right?
It is perfect.
And they shouldn't be able to, I don't think that they should be able to play in the stock market either. Because we're seeing stuff like Nancy Pelosi's issues, where she's like, it's so bad. Like that is just not, you can't make unbiased decisions when it's going to benefit your own bank account to make laws and regulations against or for something. It's pure corruption, and they shouldn't be able to do that. And we need to get to a place where our politicians, our government knows that they work for us. They think that they are better than us. These career politicians who have no grasp on what the average American middle class is going through should not be our leader. They should not be in charge. They should not be our representatives, because they cannot represent us, because they don't know us and they don't know what we need, and they're corrupt. They're taking money from China and all these other places, and and these corporations, and they're doing wrong with it. It's not for the benefit. They're not for the benefit of the people. And so we need to get to a place where they need to work on commission. You only get paid as our governor if our economy is booming, if we are doing well. Like, there needs to be some sort of like checkpoint. We need more checks and balances in our government for sure, because it has not only overreached, but it's become authoritarian, and we need to take it back. We have to take our government back.
Yes.
Trees are so pretty.
I know. So the thing I was going to say was just the good out of all this bad is the exposure. Everything, whether or not things are being hidden, I mean, they are. It's almost like the more things are hidden, oh no, don't look over here, all this sleight of hand that's happening is actually, again, coming back to the software of the hardware. It can't help but expose what is behind it. The more you try to hide things, the more you realize the absence of them. Okay, let's just say millions of people are experiencing a symptom with a hypothetical shot that they took. And then they go to look it up on a platform, and there's no information.
Right.
But then they talk to Sue down the street, and they have 5 other friends that they verbally talk to, and they're like, yeah, I've been feeling funny too. And then they look it up on other platforms, and there's just nothing out there. And then they realize that they get on a different platform that they haven't tried, and all of a sudden there's like millions of people all saying the same thing. And they're like, but wait a minute, why is this information here, but it's not there? And why is this other platform that doesn't have information, why are they saying this information is harmful?
Right.
No, and then all of a sudden it takes a while, but I think millions of people in the world are seeing something weird is going on, because the more they try to hide stuff, and the more they play this game of sleight of hand, the more people are saying, one, something weird is going on, and two, like, it's actually exposing the very thing that they're trying to hide.
Yeah.
It's like there's only so many spots you can hide the bodies, you know? Like, eventually it's going to be like, yeah, this is a cemetery. There wasn't a cemetery here before. Like, there's something...
Like poltergeist.
Exactly. Like, you can only... The truth always comes to light. It comes right back to that again.
The bodies always come to the surface.
The bodies always come to the surface because there's only so many lies for so long.
The truth always surfaces, and that's, I think, God is truth. Truth is God, and I think that's why we know. Yeah, that's why we know that you follow the truth, you follow the light, and that's how you know, right? That you're on the right side.
Yeah. Like, again, the software can't take over the hardware, and the hardware can't take over the architect,
Right. Oh, the grand architect. Yeah. I'm a true believer that truth always comes to light. And there's so many times where I've seen things where you think that people could get away with it. And in our judicial system, maybe people do, right? You get people, the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. That thing, those sort of things happen. Ghislaine Maxwell, all those sorts of things happen. But the truth itself can still be evident even if justice isn't prevailing. Truth always comes to light.
Yeah, that again is just all part of the system. So information is it's shared.
Yeah.
But here's another thing to sidetrack a little bit is that as crazy as we're getting with technology right now, and trying to use technology to stab versus cut a loaf of bread is like we're obviously using it for some very controversial and weird things, and like including censorship, bias censorship, but the more the more out of control we get with how we use technology also reveals that's a problem that we it's just more exposure. The more you try, the more you try to hide truth, you accidentally butt dial.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, right? And that's how we see it too now. Anything that like this administration tells you, like when they were saying I would never take the vaccine, I was like, well, maybe we should take the vaccine. And then we were like, you must take it. And I was like, oh, fuck no. Now I definitely don't want it. Thank you. And I was saying that too, like they're starting to censor the words astrology and tarot, Which I was like, oh, well, maybe we need to look more into maybe there being more validity to that than most people really think. Because if they're censoring it, if they're silencing it, then what are they trying to hide?
Right.
So now the truth becomes even more, we end up knowing what is truth by seeing what they're trying to suppress. Like, I think that's what you were trying to say too, right? Yeah. Yeah. So
in the end, there is definitely some kind of collective awakening and identity sifting, trying to figure things out. And obviously there's a lot of extremes and people don't know how to handle it, and things are being used to control it in the name of comfort and safety. But it's not going to work. It's only going to work for a short time period.
Yeah.
Because once you accept the deal with the devil, like, yes, he's going to fix everything. Especially I'm looking at you politicians, no matter what quote unquote side
and Hollywood
you find yourself on, when you have to say, trust us, that's eventually you might be able to get away with that, but only for so long. When you have to convince someone to trust you, and your work is getting sloppy, the truth's going to come out, and that's what we're seeing. And that's why everybody's freaking out, is because it's actually a new world is being revealed right before our eyes.
Oh, I love that. Isn't that hopeful? Doesn't that make your heart feel all kind of good stuff? All right. Till next time, everybody.
Stay high, everyone.
Congratulations, you've made it all the way to the end of this long-ass podcast. And we want to thank you for joining us. And we want to hear from you. What answers do you have to these questions? What comments do you have? What insight do you have? Share with us. And what questions do you have for the answers? Find us on all podcast apps and on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. And of course, you can find us on our website. Thanks so much for listening, and stay high, everyone.